Good evening. Welcome to Northbeat. I'm Megan Roberts. The community of Mayo, Yukon has faced a number of crises over the last 12 months, but today, a bright spot. It was announced that the community is getting an injection of cash for land-based healing programs. The money will come from the territory's First Nations Land-Based Healing Fund.
This is a strategy that we're launching to support trauma, grief, and loss. And again, doing it within an absolute First Nations concept.
Earlier this year, the community declared an opioid emergency following a double homicide. Months after the declaration, officials said tensions have shrunk slightly, but the effects linger. Today's announcement was made in Ottawa at the Yukon Intergovernmental Forum. In total, the community will get $9 million over 3 years. It'll be used to support healing and wellness through traditional practices like hunting, outdoor survival, and overall well-being. The CBC announced today it'll cut as much as 10% of its workforce, about 600 employees. The public broadcaster says it's making the move in response to a $125 million shortfall. As Ashley Burke reports, the public broadcaster is one of many news outlets struggling to adjust to a changing media landscape.
CBC Radio Canada is joining a long list of media companies falling on hard times.
We will reduce the number of shows overall.
The head of the public broadcaster announcing it's cutting 10% of the workforce. That's about 600 jobs and 200 vacant positions gone.
We also have the same pressures with respect to inflation, cost of production, cost of operations, declines in revenue related to our traditional television services. All of that has created a perfect storm.
The corporation staring at a $125 million shortfall at a time when many media companies have slashed jobs too.
We're in the midst of a huge disruption.
Chris Waddell, a professor emeritus of journalism and former CBC bureau chief, says it's time for the government to take a serious look at CBC's mandate.
What we need to see, I think, is a very different CBC that has no advertising, that focuses on narrower things, that content is available to anyone free that wants to use it, because that would be a big help to small news organizations.
CBC is a crown corporation, which means it's owned by the government but operates at arm's length and has journalistic independence. Canada's Heritage Minister says soon she's launching a review into CBC's mission.
This is a discussion that we need to have with the Canadian population.
CBC Radio Canada received about $1.3 billion in public funding last year. That's about $33 per taxpayer. As Ottawa seeks to rein in spending, the government has asked CBC, like all federal departments and agencies, to look for another 3% in savings.
Every ministry and every agency is currently doing the work of making a plan according to those cuts. But the final decision concerning CBC Radio-Canada has not been made yet.
A spokesperson for CBC says that some of the cuts will start immediately, but the majority of them will be rolled out over the next year. That spokesperson also said that the budget to produce CBC content will be tightening, and they'll be cutting tens of millions of dollars to buy programming. So that means fewer new TV shows and episodes. Ashley Burke, CBC News, Ottawa.
The government of Nunavut says it will not agree to mediation in a dispute between the GN and the Iqaluit District Education Authority. It all centers around bringing external support workers to Iqaluit schools. The CBC's Emma Tranter has more.
The Education Authority says the government is attempting to block student support workers from helping students in Iqaluit. Earlier this year, the Education Authority received $120,000 in funding from the federal Inuit Child First initiative to bring in workers to assess 28 children for emotional and behavioral challenges. The GN refused to let those workers enter Iqaluit schools, saying it had already offered assessments for students and has a strict process in place for people to enter schools. In court this afternoon, the Education Authority asked the GN to agree to mediation to resolve the issue. After refusing the Education Authority's request, the GN said it will respond to the authority's claims by the end of the month. Emma Tranter, CBC News, Iqaluit.
For weeks, we've been hearing that many Whitehorse residents with disabilities are fed up about the state of the streets. Now, they may be going to court. A lawyer representing Yukoners with disabilities has published an open letter addressed to the city of Whitehorse. It says snow and ice buildup on sidewalks and inaccessible parking spaces are blocking vital services. And if there isn't immediate change, they're prepared to file a class action lawsuit against the city.
That particular curb and that icy patch you see on the ramp, it's pretty much everywhere like that right now in the city of Whitehorse. And what's even worse about it is that it hasn't been that bad of a year right now. It hasn't snowed in a while. So one asks oneself, why is this still like that? Why hasn't it been dealt with yet by the city? And the answers that my clients are looking for, I think they might have to go to court to get them.
Whitehorse Mayor and Council are planning to debate this issue at a meeting tonight. The power is back on in Pungnuktu Nunavut after some residents spent days without heat or lights. The power went out last Wednesday when a strong blizzard hit the community. According to Environment Canada, winds were gusting up to 133 kilometers an hour. A state of local emergency was declared on Saturday. An emergency shelter was set up at the community school where the local Northern store and Arctic Co-op gave out all of the food in their freezers to residents. Power was reported to be fully restored to the community by 9 o'clock last night. The fall brought a number of intense storms to Nunavut. Last week's blizzard in the Baffin region came right after another strong blizzard hit the Kivadluk, and it also knocked out power. This autumn was significantly warmer than usual across all three territories. Some communities saw their warmest falls ever recorded. That happened in Cambridge Bay, Nunavut, Inuvik NWT, and Old Crow, Yukon. All three communities had their warmest falls on record. For Inuvik and Cambridge Bay, that meant daily temperatures almost 6 degrees above normal, while in Old Crow, temperatures were more than 9 degrees above the historical average. This is all having an impact on life in these communities. Fort Simpson NWT saw its fourth warmest autumn. It's been so warm there, they can't make ice in the arena, and that has some in the community wondering if they need a plan B.
We really need to look at alternatives. If that's the case, do we have enough interest, funding to be able to get an artificial ice rink so that we could start our seasons earlier?
The unseasonably warm conditions are expected to continue in many communities. In Yellowknife, tomorrow's daytime high is forecast to be minus 3 degrees. That is 15 degrees above average. This week, people in the Northwest Territories will find out who their new premier will be. MLAs cast their secret ballots for premier on Thursday, December 7th, and they have 4 people to choose from. Tonight, we bring you 2 of those candidates, Kieran Testart and RJ Simpson. Here's their answer to the question, why do you think you should be premier?
So I think that Northerners expect change from their government, and this time we've had 3 change elections in a row, and this is the third, right? And that should be telling us something, that we need to change how the legislature operates, change how the GNWT operates, and offer real solutions for the challenges we face and a different way of doing business. And that's what I set out to do. And I think when I set my commitments on the floor of the House, that really resonated with a lot of people, and we're getting good feedback. And I'm having conversations with the other members, and ultimately it's up to them to decide who is the next premier of the Northwest Territories. But I think we're on track to make some real progress on that question.
I was an MLA, the regular member, for 4 years. And during that time, you get a really good sense of what the government does, how it interacts with its citizens, and a good overview of all the government departments. And then in these last 4 years as a minister, I've really learned how decisions are made and the best way to get things done. And I have a much better sense of what the government is capable of. And so I think that what we need to do is really focus our efforts on certain areas. I think we are stretching ourselves too thin, we're doing things halfway, but there's some issues we need to deal with. There's issues that are pressing and need to be dealt with immediately. And then I also want to work towards the future state of the NWT.
In Nunavut, ArcticNet's research conference kicked off in Iqaluit. The 4-day event brings together Arctic researchers and students from across the country. The first day opened with a discussion by Inuit who work in academia. Panelists spoke about the dynamic between studying the North and living in the South for school. Joshua Komagapik helped organize the panel.
Since we have the panel here in Iqaluit this year, I really wanted to have Inuit Voices be a part of the program, especially because it's on our land, and we had some really great panelists today that gave some good insights.
Inuya Sudlavinik also grew up in Iqaluit. She says although it's great to have this event in the North, she struggles with how much Arctic research happens in the South.
It's hard to be an Arctic researcher while you're based in the South. So you're not always here in Nunavut in the Arctic to do research.
The conference wraps up on Thursday.
I'm Kathleen Goldhar, host of a new podcast, Crime Story. Every week we bring you a different crime, told by the storyteller who knows it best. All the ins and outs.
It was a story of murder, of exploitation of a schoolgirl.
You got one witness who can't be found. You got another witness who has changed his entire story.
I remember just this feeling of like complete disbelief.
Crime Story, available now on CBC Listen or wherever you get your podcasts.
You are constantly on the move, and so are we, making sense of the moments that matter together.
Looks like things are maybe winding down.
Asking what, why, when.
To the center of the biggest stories, meeting the people living them.
Thank you for letting us be here. What's your situation?
Making sense of our world.
How are we going to be part of this solution?
With you and for you.
Connectedness, groundedness.
I'm Adrienne Arsenault. This is The National.
Canadians of generations have been miseducated.
But we don't talk about that.
We are here. We have been here.
These stories are us.
Yeah, dog!
Oh, an absolute classic.
All right.
Let's go! Yeah!
This is The National.
Every week, the issues that matter to Canadians.
These are acts of desperation.
Connecting politics to people.
Some people have lost everything.
Join me for Rosemary Barton Live.
Canada's craft brewing industry is facing a sobering reality. The cost of living is soaking up their profits and wringing out their customers. Many beer makers are looking at turning off the taps. Lindsay Duncombe has that story.
In just a few weeks, the fermenters at this Vancouver craft brewery will be emptied for good.
And when we finally close that door on December 31st, it's going to be challenging, I think. It'll be sad.
It's not because the beer sucks. This won Best in Canada. But owner Chris Lay says his new landlord plans to raise the rent to up to $10,000 a month. Combine that with the soaring cost of hops, barley, taxes, and well, pretty much everything, and he can't make a go of it.
When you look at it purely logically, it's a no-brainer. Emotionally, much harder.
The problem for breweries right across the country is that everything you need to make beer is costing more, and people aren't drinking as much beer. The BC Craft Brewers Guild says warnings about booze consumption are changing behavior, and those who do imbibe are broke.
We just are not seeing the drinkers. People are not coming in as often to the tasting rooms, or they're not purchasing because they just can't afford to do it. They're buying groceries and gas.
That makes it tough to consider raising prices to cover costs.
I think it would be easy to say 15% of the businesses are very much struggling, that they may not be in business this time next year.
Rent may be especially high in Vancouver and other big cities, but breweries in smaller places are at risk too, says the National Association. It wants to see pandemic loans extended and federal taxes reduced.
Really just to stay afloat through 2024 and beyond. Breweries just need a break right now.
Chris Lay is looking for a new place to brew, somewhere more affordable, perhaps shared. His business plan now includes craft non-alcoholic soda, adapting to sobering times. Lindsay Duncombe, CBC News, Vancouver.
Online shopping can be essential for Canadians in rural and remote places, including many Northerners. But a BC man's recent experience with Amazon may serve as a cautionary tale. The expensive watch he ordered was not in the package he received. He's not been able to get a refund, and now he's out more than $2,000. Erica Johnson has that story.
We heard from a man who lives in a remote part of BC on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Leo Steinberg has to order most things online. So he was eager to pick up an Amazon package from his local post office, expecting this watch, $2,100, but it has GPS for hiking and can track vital signs to help with some recently diagnosed health issues.
I opened it right away because I was looking forward to it, and it was empty.
The box was torn, enough for a hand to reach in. All that remained was an empty watch box and a silicone strap. He emailed Amazon right away and got a reply telling him to file a police report. He did, but Amazon said the document was missing information. He sent screenshots from the RCMP's website with more info, insisted the company had all the details. Amazon wouldn't budge.
I was emailing, calling, was a nightmare.
Frustrating customer experiences actually serve a purpose for big companies like Amazon, says a UBC business prof. They can offer a fairly generous refund policy, while at the same time limit how often they have to hand those refunds out.
Many consumers are disencouraged and drop out in the process. The companies only has to pay those most persistent consumers that go all the way.
Steinberg says, living remotely, he'll now give other online retailers his business. Amazon declined an interview request and didn't answer a number of written questions. A spokesperson told Go Public the company apologizes to the customer for the negative experience and says it will continue to work directly with him. Leo Steinberg says he hasn't heard from the online retail giant for weeks. Erica Johnson, CBC News, Vancouver.
For many Canadians, the beginning of December marks the beginning of the holiday season, which means people will be heading out to buy their Christmas trees. But how soon is too soon to get that tree set up? Here's some advice from the experts.
Hi everyone, I'm Aaron Gregoluk here at Greenland Garden Center, and here are 5 things to keep in mind when choosing your Christmas tree. Number 1, why do trees cost so much? As you can see here, prices vary depending on species and sizes. First thing, the grower has to grow these trees. Some of these trees are 4 to 5 years old, some are even 10 to 12 years old, so that will all factor into the price. The other big one for us is transportation. Getting the trees to your location is a big cost that's incurred. Number 2, when is the best time to buy your tree? That all depends on where you are, your location, and what's available. These days, with what seems to be a shortage out there and high demand, I would say the sooner you can buy your tree, the better. Trees are usually gone by the 1st to 2nd week of December. By December 10th, there's not a lot of selection out there. Number 3, which is the right tree for you? We prefer the fir trees. They hold their needles really well. They have a good smell to them. Douglas fir would be your most economical tree. Has the strongest scent that's available, but the branches are a little weaker. Nordman fir is more like your traditional artificial tree. Individual branches, strong branches, nice silver undertone, green shiny top. And then noble fir is a very full tree. You can't see the trunk at all, but still has those individual branches that are easy to hang your ornaments or heavy decorations on. Number 4, what should you do when you bring your tree home? First thing, transportation. If you've had it cut at the place you bought it, we can cut it here for you. Don't get that cut dirty. Don't scrape it on the ground. Don't get any dirt into that cut area. Once you get it home, if it hasn't been cut, you need to do your own fresh cut and put it in water within a couple hours. That can either be in the stand inside your house or in a garage in a bucket of water. Number 5, how can you keep that tree alive for as long as possible? If you can lower your room temperature, that's great. Obviously, stay comfortable, but if you can lower it, that's great. Extra humidity. If you had a humidifier, if you can bump up the humidity in your house a little, that will help as well. keep it away from fans, keep it away from drafts, you know, close the register near it. All those things will help. So you put it in the house. How can you keep that thing going? Water, water, water. That's the biggest tip. Most people can get a good 4 weeks, maybe 5 weeks inside their house with their tree. If you have to hit a certain day like New Year's Day or Ukrainian Christmas or whatever day is important to you, scale that back about 4 weeks, and I think that's a safe time to bring that tree in the house. And after Christmas, what should you do with that Christmas tree? If you're out in the country or if you compost, you could definitely remove the limbs and try to compost it. It may take a little bit of time. Otherwise, your municipality, they usually have scheduled days for pickup of those trees.
Cree beading artist Cynthia Bohm spent 2 years recreating a pair of her grandma's gauntlets to honor her memory. Bohm was inspired to learn beading after she found her great-grandmother's beadwork in the Manitoba Museum. CBC Indigenous spent time with her at her home in Selkirk, Manitoba.
If I stop beading tomorrow, I'm content knowing that I had this experience and learned from my grandmother. Beading was always a part of my childhood and my community. And it was something I was always fascinated with. I was inspired and I always wanted to learn. But it wasn't until I was 50 years old I learned from an Indigenous artist in Winnipeg. I remember my grandmother and even my mother with her sewing materials. They kept their supplies in those little cookie tins, and you know, you kind of always thought there was some chocolates or cookies in there, and you'd only find sewing supplies. I really thought about what my mom said many years ago. She said Granny had a pair of moccasins in a museum. So at that time, I inquired, giving the Manitoba Museum, Dr. Maureen Matthews, very limited information of my grandmother's name. With that limited information, Dr. Maureen Matthews took that and she found a collection of my grandmother's beading. It was emotional, finding my grandmother's work, because I always wanted to have a piece of, of her work. My most recent project is, I always say, I call it a project of love, because it's the most special project I've ever had an opportunity to do, was recreating my great-grandmother's elaborately beaded gauntlets.
When Cynthia approached us about the project to recreate, I was so excited for her and so excited every time she came in to study these and color match all the beads. It was so incredible to watch her work and to chat with her about the work. And it makes me know a lot more about the collection too, so it's a learning thing for me as well.
It was a project where I wanted to ask others for help, but I wanted it to be a personal journey between my grandmother and I. And throughout the project, I felt her spirit was with me, and I let her spirit guide me and say, this is okay. There was times where I became frustrated because it is an elaborately beaded project. And I was thinking of my grandmother, and a lot of times I talked to her like she was there. And I said, oh, this is getting hard, or, I was frustrated, and it's like I would hear my grandmother say what she used to always say when we misbehaved when we were young, oh, you foolish little girls. And, I thought of her saying that, and she would tap our behinds a little bit, and, that was a memory that came up, and she was always so encouraging. This project too also really connected me to my siblings, and to in visiting, we talked about our grandparents a lot. We, talked about our childhood with them in our lives. Connecting with beadwork is just the most beautiful feeling in the world. It's where I feel content And if there's something you love, follow that. Follow your heart. You don't know where that will take you.
That is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. We leave you with a look at some of the Christmas lights around Whitehorse. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.
You're not a millennial.
Yeah, well, Dr. Dre's not a doctor. I feel like such an imposter.
You need money to survive.
He had something to hide.
Try typing with your thumbs.
What do you call it?
It's called a BlackBerry.
Huh. We call them crackberries.
There's a serial killer on the loose.
2 attacks in a week.
Go on. Everybody's got something to hide.
We're not gonna be here forever, right? Makes me want to make some changes.
Your family can't take much more.
Think you're a better driver when you're high? Think again. No alcohol, no drugs, no victims. A message from Mad Canada.
What Canadian animal is bigger than a school bus? Eats tiny critters but doesn't have any teeth. Likes to swim in cold ocean waters in the summer, and feeds milk to its baby calf. If you guessed the right whale, you're correct. These giant whales live in busy parts of the ocean, so people need to be careful when driving boats near them. To learn more about the North Atlantic right whale, visit our website at hww.ca.
I want my children home where they should be.
You'll go to jail if you don't sign.
There's gonna come a time you'll feel the darkness. You don't let them win.
I understand that you're struggling emotionally.
Sure you want to do this?
I mean, it's research, right? You need to stop asking me for things I can't give you. You've done it my whole life.